So I just got quiet, so I'll say good morning. I'm Lawrence Brewer, Chief Records Officer. Welcome to our, what is this? This is June. Welcome to our June Agency Services Bridge Meeting. For those of you in the room, hope you're enjoying the air conditioning. For those of you at home, hope the AC is working and hasn't crapped out like I know it has for a couple people I talked to over the last couple of days. We have a full agenda. Couple of announcements first. First, we hope many of you are able to join us, for those of you who are here in the room, and for those of you who are not in the room, for next time when we meet. Our coffee and networking session we had at 9 o'clock this morning up in the Washington Conference Room. Really do enjoy the time where it's very informal and we can just chat with you and you can talk to your appraiser, your FRCP account representative, other folks from NARA. And have some coffee and a couple of Krispy Kremes we always have out. So we encourage you next time when we meet in August, which will be August 15th, to try and set aside some time to come up and join us at 9 o'clock before we come down for the meeting. As we go through the meeting, if you have any questions, if you're here in the room, we have some microphones on the aisle. For the benefit of the folks on the recording, we ask that you tell us who you are and what agency you're coming from so that folks on the webcast can hear who you are. If you are on the webcast, you can send in questions via chat on YouTube. You can also email us at rmcommunications@nara.gov, and we're monitoring the email stream right now. So the other thing that we do, the third part of the Bridge meeting, is the after meeting. So today at 1 o'clock in the Washington room upstairs, Appraisal Team 1 will be hosting. So if you are an agency that works with Appraisal Team 1, please join us up in the Washington room. There will also be representatives from other NARA units. The FRCP account reps will be here as well. And if you're not in an Appraisal Team 1 agency, if you still want to come and participate and join in and ask questions of the NARA folks in the room, we do invite you to do that. Finally, if you do have any questions, feedback after the meeting, please send us your feedback via RM Communications. We really do want to hear from you. In terms of how the meeting experience was for you, what we could do better, and if there are any suggestions for topics that you would want to hear when we meet again in August, we'd love to hear from you. So on to the agenda. As you can see, we do have a number of speakers. First off, we'll have David Miller, who's going to talk about digitization project with the National Register, National Historic Landmarks. David Weinberg, the director of the FRCP, is here to give some updates from the program. Andrea Riley, the supervisor of the General Record Schedule team, will be calling in to provide an update on the latest GRS transmittal. Don Rosen and Evangela Wimbush-Jeffrey will be providing an update on records management oversight and reporting activities. And then we will close with Gary Ralphus, who's the director of the Records Management Training Program, who's going to give us an update on where things are with training. So with that, I will turn it over to our first speaker, David Miller, to talk about the National Register of Historic Places digitization project. David?
Thanks, Lawrence. I want to take a couple minutes this morning to talk about a non-traditional record center service. You're well aware the Federal Record Centers program offers record storage, disposal, retrieval services, accessioning services for analog records. I want to talk to you this morning a few minutes about some record scanning services we do also offer to federal agencies through the course of what we do, trying to help records make their way through the end of the life cycle to public access into the NARA catalog. Across the country, we offer basic scanning services for just reference, basic smart scan, we call it, for small-scale reference requests that you might have on records that are stored in FRCs. Those are very quick turnaround, very small volume reference requests that we handle through the scanning services at all of our FRCs around the country. We also offer more robust services, more larger scale scanning, project-based scanning services at a couple of our centers around the country. The Civilian Personnel Records Center Annex in Valmeyer, Illinois is our central site. We also have satellite document conversion units in Atlanta, Chicago, Fort Worth, and Riverside, where we can do larger scale scanning like I'm going to describe for you this morning. We can convert microforms, microfiche, aperture cards, maps, photos, certainly textual records of all sorts, oversized material as well. The crazier specialty scanning, very large formats, very specialty formats, perhaps not, but most everything we're able to handle through our document conversion units. Certainly records that make their way into this process have gained a certain amount of value. If you're applying resources to scan these records and make them accessible, it's because they're of some importance to you. And no doubt there is a lot of indexing and metadata available to describe these records at the document level, at the file level, and certainly at the record series level. What we hope to do in these scanning projects is extract the metadata that's most essential to provide access to those records and preserve that and make that associated with the images that we're producing through the course of the scanning effort. Each set of records is a little bit different. Each set of records is going to have its own set of kind of criteria and metadata requirements and indexing needs. We work with subject matter experts who are the record creators, the records owners, to determine what that metadata needs to be and make sure we can do that in the most efficient way possible to make these records retrievable once they've been imaged. And of course, with the Federal Record Centers program, this is a reimbursable service that we offer to agencies on a project-by-project, case-by-case basis as the need arises. A lot of what motivates me in the Federal Record Centers is that we come into contact with a lot of really important records. We don't own these records. We didn't create these records, but we're somehow associated with their preservation and eventually their access. This particular project was working with the National Park Service. We're working with the National Historic Landmarks and National Register of Historic Places. Those record creators, over the course of some 50 years, have created a body of records that document the register process, the nomination process, the evaluation of historic sites and places. What we have before us is roughly 2,500 cubic feet worth of records nationwide, organized by state, in case file format that we're scanning on behalf of the Park Service. About the programs themselves, these are National Park Service programs, of course. The National Historic Landmarks are for sites of national, if not world significance. There are roughly 2,500 of those now. And the National Register of Historic Places of state and local importance for the most part. So roughly 100,000 distinct sites that we're documenting in these case files and the images that we produced in this scanning project. Our project partners especially, we're grateful for the Park Service and the resources they're able to apply to these records, the care they've taken with documenting this process and these sites. Certainly the leadership of recently retired Dr. Stephanie Toothman in the National Park Service was crucial to, that leadership was crucial to getting this project off the ground and running as it is now. The project leadership of the Western Archaeological and Conservation Center in Tucson, Arizona. They're our project support and our project points of contact at the Park Service. They are responsible for the document preparation, the metadata creation and validation, and final quality control once we've produced images and give those back to them as our customer. On the National Archives side, the Federal Record Centers, I'm representing here today. The Federal Record Centers in Fort Worth and Riverside are the two operations that have taken the lead in scanning these records. The leadership of Jennifer Kuhn in Fort Worth and Mike Wary in Riverside. They've been diligently working for a couple of years now, plowing through state by state to document, to scan these records that document historic sites and landmarks. Once we produce these images, we give the images themselves, the metadata, back to the Park Service for final review, final business analysis, and eventually those records make their way back to the National Archives into our online catalog and eventually become publicly accessible through the catalog, through the help of the Research Services operation, especially Ted Hull and and Brett Abrams of the Electronic Records Division of Research Services, and the Office of Innovation, working with the online public catalog. So a lot of players, a lot of people cared about these records for many decades, and we're just the ones doing the scanning itself and the providing the service to digitize these records to make them accessible for the public. So with that, I do want to dive into the records themselves because they're way more interesting than what's here on the slide, and give you a little sense of what we're handling in this project. A lot of what we see in these records are photographs. We have photographic reference sheets of the photographs that are in the files that document why the architectural significance or historical significance of these sites. This is a photograph form of the Laura Ingalls Wilder home in Missouri, documenting where it is, what it is, and why it's important. And that's the house itself. This is a target submarine that was commissioned in 1952, the USS Marlin, that the folks at Freedom Park in Omaha, Nebraska, were interested in getting made into a National Historic Landmark, along with its sister vessel, the USS Hazard. There was a lot of back and forth in the file about whether this was appropriate, whether this was something the National Park Service was going to sign off on. So if you look in the case file, you'll see some interesting documentary material about that review and evaluation process. It's not always pretty. It kind of warms my bureaucratic heart to see some of the honest opinions of the reviewers in the Park Service to see why this is or is not of historical value. So I want to call attention to some of the findings, I suppose, of the National Park Service here. You might not be able to read it on screen, but the review unit chief in the review said, "Of no significance, the submarine was built as a target, the other as a minesweeper, nominated because of pressure." Fair enough, okay. 7 months later, the next review, the USS Marlin, the comparatively recent date, 1952, and lack of specific historical associations, aside from training, do not merit exception to the 50-year rule. So this is rejected for the National Register of Historic Places. It's not old enough, not historic enough, not worth it. Its sister ship was made into a national landmark. This is one from an entirely different site, a different place that is indeed on the register somewhere. You can search the catalog if you want to find out which one this actually refers to, but haters gonna hate. Yuck. Unenthusiastic accept. Not everyone loves this site, but that's the kind of stuff you'll find in these records. Photos, the honest reviewers' opinions of these sites, and some other documentary material. I do want to jump out to the NARA catalog for a second. Oops. There we go. Oops. There's a go. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So as I said, these are states that we are scanning state by state. We've got 15 in the catalog now. We've got a half dozen or so in various states of being scanned or reviewed at the moment. I think Alaska, Iowa, and Washington are being scanned as we speak. What you see is the NARA catalog before you. This is the state of Michigan. When you search for this in the NARA catalog, you'll see a list of all the properties, and in particular, you'll see the first couple of images being the finding aids for these sites. So you'll get the list of locations that we're talking about and places that we're talking about. That finding aid is going to be, and of course I clicked on it, there we go. That finding aid is going to be found in each one of those state files that you'll see in the catalog to give the researcher orientation about what records they might find in this collection. And then when you click on an individual file, you'll see a single-page PDF. It's all black and white. There's a little bit of color in the material, but most of it's black and white. You'll see a single-page PDF of each historic place and site with the documentation of why it was nominated and why it was assessed as of historic value. Okay. If you have any questions about scanning services for the Federal Records Centers program, you can certainly contact me directly. You can contact your Federal Records Center account manager, or you can just email frc_scanning@nara.gov, and that will find its way to the right place if you've got a set of records that you think you might want digitized. I don't know if any questions at the moment, anything that we've got here in the room or online? Hearing none, I guess I will pass it over back to Lawrence.
Thank you, David. So right now, we will turn it over to David Weinberg, Director of the Federal Records Center Program, for some updates.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good morning, everyone. Let me just advance this. That was perhaps the wrong button to push. There we go. So I'm pleased to be here today to talk about some updates within the Federal Records Centers program. It was good that David started off giving a deeper dive on one of our many diverse offerings we provide to all of you and all of our federal customers around the country. What I would like to do today is give you a high-level overview of many of the different activities we've been working on. And one of the things we do within the Federal Records Centers program is follow the balanced scorecard. We do this in our strategic planning. We do this as we structure our meetings and set the agenda. So everything we do is all structured around the balanced scorecard. And if you're not familiar with this methodology, you focus on each of these different quadrants with equal value. So personnel and resources feeds into internal processes. That in turn feeds into support we provide to customers, and in the end result, does it support mission results. So we really do embody this methodology in everything we do, and I'll follow that methodology today as I go through the presentation. So we're going to start off with personnel and resources. I'm going to be addressing these three bullets in a little bit of details. First off, staffing, of course, is very, very important. We've all been subject to the government-wide hiring freeze. Many people think that as a fee-for-service program within the Federal Records Centers program that we are exempt from certain government-wide policies. That is not the case. The hiring freeze, both on federal employees, on contractor support, did impact us, and it was particularly challenging. Organizationally, the major service units within the FRCP is the Operations Division, and that's basically all of the Federal Records Centers except for the facilities in St. Louis. And in St. Louis, the National Personnel Records Center, both the military and civilian side, that compromises the other half. And it's about maybe 40% of our staffings and operations, 60%, give or take, is within NPRC. And as you can see by this chart, of our total staffing, we had on board on the operations side of 70%. So it's a pretty big gap we had as far as vacant positions that we could not fill. On the National Personnel Records Center side, it comes in at 83%. So we really had to do a little bit of creative juggling to be certain that services that you all receive from us would not be interrupted. It did create a little bit of stress for us, and I'm sure as you've been managing your workforce, it's created some stress on your each agencies, but hopefully the services you receive from us were not impacted. Despite the challenges, we're now getting permission to approve some backfills now that the hiring freeze has been lifted, but it's very, very conservative because of the development of the agency reform plan within the National Archives, the same thing all of your agencies are working on. So it should help restore some, but not all of our vacancies, and hopefully, again, you'll continue to experience quality services and not be able to really see or feel the impact of staff shortages. Next, continuing down staffing, I want to talk about a major reorganization we had at the beginning of this fiscal year on our operations side. Again, that's all the FRCs outside of St. Louis. We did the reorganization in the first quarter, and we now have put in place assistant directors for East, West, and DC. Doing so allows the operations director, who formerly directly supervised all of the FRCs, 22 staff, 22 appraisals. It's a lot of work for that kind of scope. We now have She has additional support with the 3 division directors over East, West, and DC, so that does create more oversight, more continuity between the services we provide in all the FRCs on the operations side. And the final thing I want to talk about on staffing is an increased emphasis on employee engagement, as we're just wrapping up now the Employee Viewpoint Survey season, both within the National Archives and all other federal agencies. Our strategy has been that each of the FRCs develop their own employee engagement plan. Each of the major components within the National Personnel Record Center does the same. And each of these plans focuses in on the top 3 initiatives most important to them. So what's important to the folks in Fort Worth will differ from what's important to the folks at the Washington National Record Center. And we basically carry out those plans in support of our employees. And we've had very good scores on the upswing for EVS over the last few years. And I am a firm believer that happy employees translate to quality services. So I hope you have seen an improvement in our services as our employees have become more engaged in the work they do and take on an ownership in the business process. Next, turning to information systems improvements, we have 2 major IT systems. ARCIS, which again principally supports operations with a little bit of crossover to the National Personnel Record Center, and CMRS, which exclusively supports NPRC. On the ARCIS side, we have implemented new internal disposal processes that turns around the disposal workflow. Our detailed review now happens after the customer agency concurs on disposal. Formerly, we did that before. We invested a lot of staff resources in very detailed reviews. Those disposal notices did not come back with concurrence, and that was in essence wasted, or at least we can say at best deferred effort. Flipping this around allows us to really use our staff resources most efficiently. In addition, part of the improvement is to include digitized copies of the SF-135 for portal customers. We did have a customer-facing disposal module that we're going to delay until next fiscal year because of feedback we received from customers. So you can look forward to that next fiscal year. On the CMRS side within the National Personnel Record Center, the major initiative there has been digitization enhancements. We are in the process now of launching in a pilot mode next fiscal year, but planning for the last 2 years, significant changes where we will digitize all of the official military personnel files that are requested by veterans, by next of kin, and by military departments, VA, and other authorized users. So instead of pulling the file, sending them back to a core technician to be worked, we will scan those files. And actually, we've piloted using iPads. So we're going to take digital images of the OMPF, of the requested documents, in the stacks, and that saves us from pulling the file and then later refiling that file, allows us to be more efficient. Where we can't scan in the stacks, for example, if you're up on a ladder, we don't want employees scanning up on a ladder, we'll pull those files, send them off to the core technicians where they will then be digitized. The benefit of doing that is these are permanent records. It allows at the appropriate time the digital images to be ingested into the National Archives catalog. When these records are requested a second, third, fourth time, as they often are, we have a digital copy, and there's no need to then go out and pull and refile the original OMPF, which of course also reduces wear and tear on these permanent records. Another aspect of our digitization efforts in St. Louis is to digitize and use optical character recognition for all of the inbound mail requests. And that allows us to redeploy staff who are presently keying information off of the request to begin the order fulfillment process. And finally, we will be able to then digitally deliver the official military personnel files that have been requested to the requester electronically through secure download sites. And the advantage there is we're not handling the documents, there's no postage involved, there's no materials involved. The requested records arrive much, much faster in a matter of days versus our current 7-day turnaround time. So again, many, many major improvements. We have modeled the savings from this initiative, and by 2020, when we first kicked this off in full production, we estimate it could save up to $1.1 million annually, and the 20-year projection in today's dollars is a $32 million cost avoidance. So that will certainly help contain costs as we move forward, providing services to the military departments. On our storage capacity, I'm really pleased to report we're actually approaching an all-time high as far as available space. This is largely due to approved disposals. Thank you all very much for concurring when those requests come in through the till disposal activity, the tobacco industry litigation disposal effort. So as you can see by this chart, we're going to hit a high point in 2019 and then begin to down curve as disposals begin to taper off. So we're in a very, very good position for the first time in many years, thanks in part to your efforts and to the efforts of all of our transfer and disposition specialists throughout the National Archives and Records Administration. It doesn't mean everything's in good shape. Certainly we have very tight facilities, specifically the Washington National Records Center in Suitland, Maryland, and the Denver and Riverside FRCs. So we manage the entire portfolio as a single portfolio, moving records around as we need to. So again, hopefully it is transparent to you and that you are able to have your records sent to a record center at the appropriate time without delay. But again, we're very, very pleased at our storage capacity. Finally, I'd like to talk about our after-hours emergency request. This is something we are now offering. Oop, jumped ahead. I'll stick here for a moment. So, jumping ahead to internal processes, shifting now. We've done a lot over the last few years of establishing standard operating procedures across all FRCs. We're really committed that the FRCP is an integrated program and the services you receive in one FRC should be identical to the services you receive in another. SOPs is a part of that effort. It's been a multi-year effort and work is continuing on that. At the National Personnel Records Center, we've acquired the technology to facilitate the blowback of microfiche copies. Before this technology was put in place, staff would go and grab microfiche. If you remember the old microfiche, you have to sort of get the individual slice of film, put it into a reader, do a print. With this technology, we are going to basically create digitized copies from the microfiche as they are requested. And the other benefit of this effort is that it enhances the digital image, where it may have not been read initially, but through the digitization effort, it can enhance the quality of the image for an overall better product to our customers. And finally, the after-hours emergency requests. This is something we've put in place as a single integrated point of contact where you call a single integrated number. This has been provided to all of our customers through the interagency agreement and other notifications. And this is especially needed because in the past there was a little bit of ad hoc, it's who you knew at a given record center, but now we've systematized this, and it's especially urgent in our Kansas City facilities, Lenexa, Lee Summit, and the Kansas City FRC, and at the National Personnel Records Center, where they often receive after-hours requests for national emergency law enforcement purposes and other needs. So again, we're very pleased to put these internal processes in place. Shifting to our third quadrant, to customers. In St. Louis, we've had a fairly significant backlog for a number of years in processing requests of the official military personnel files. You can see back in February 16, we had a high watermark of 151,000 cases pending, and that was a tremendous amount of cases where, again, veterans, next of kin who are waiting for benefits and waiting for their records. We can expedite the separation documents, but again, that volume made us all very, very uncomfortable, and this was certainly being tracked at the senior levels within the National Archives and by different oversight committees. By the beginning of where we're now is at 83,000, and we expect to end the year, actually that was the beginning of the fiscal year, we expect, and right now we're at 72,000 backlog, and we expect to end the year around 65,000. We see the work in progress. The perfect level to be is at 35,000 cases, because that's enough to keep the workforce fully engaged, fully involved, with enough work coming in. You can also see why it's flatlining in the more recent last year or so, and that is because we've worked the easier cases first. These are fire-related cases, records that were burned during the fire many, many years ago in St. Louis. So they're harder to work, but we are working them. We're continuing to make progress on the backlog. Oftentimes, agencies come to us. David talked about a couple special services. They'll come to us and say, we need move support. So more recently, we had projects with the Patent and Trademark Office, the Department of Energy, where they were moving. They needed to store a vast amount of records, and in each of those cases, we moved about 50,000 cubic feet from their storage facilities into the FRC. So again, we're very adept at trying to come up with creative solutions that support agencies' records management needs. Back in St. Louis, we do a number of metals projects. We've been providing documentation to the Department of the Navy since fiscal 2013 so they could then award medals. They were formally doing this themselves, requesting the information from us, but we do the work for them and provide it ready to be issued. We are expanding that service shortly to the U.S. Coast Guard, so we'll be providing medal support to both Navy and the Coast Guard. Similarly, the electronic official military personnel files. We've been servicing electronic OMPFs for the Department of the Army since fiscal 2000. We are in discussions now with Navy, ready to absorb their routine electronic reference activities, and that's going to be starting perhaps as soon as fiscal 2018. And finally, on customer satisfaction, extraordinarily pleased to report an uptick between 2016 and 2017, and it continues this upward trend. So comparing the years, we have 95% of our customers have said that the FRCs have met our agency expectations. 97%, the second bar chart, is that, so 97% are responsive to my service-related questions and requests, and 95% view that we are resolving services related to questions and concerns in a timely fashion. So we're, again, very pleased with these results and very pleased to see the upward trend approaching, in some cases, very close to 100%. And finally, moving to mission results, the end of our 4 quadrants. We continue to support the NARA mission. We're integrated, an important part of the National Archives, where we assist agencies managing their records and ensuring that the permanent records move through the FRCs and are accessioned into the National Archives. We've been a fee-for-service now for 18 years. We've been financially viable each of those 18 years, ending our year with a slight gain that could then be reinvested into other capital investments. So that's been very gratifying, being financially viable as a fee-for-service organization. And we continue to support our customers with new and core services, focusing on what matters most in supporting federal records management. So that was a very quick overview, a lot of scope over a very large program within the National Archives. So I thank you very much for your attention today. There's my contact information if you wish to reach me after this meeting. I'll be here for the entire meeting today, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have them at the moment. We have a quiet, oh, okay.
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. You mentioned that the ARCUS disposal module was being delayed. John McAvoy had talked about a communications and notification module. Is that proceeding at this time?
That's delayed also. Yeah, I mean, basically what we are implementing now is the internal review. We know that customers are anxiously waiting for this, but we had good feedback, and when we roll it out, we want to roll it out right. So that will be delayed until next fiscal year. Anything else? Any questions online? Okay, again, I'll be here. My contact information. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, David. Okay, so now we are going to the next part of the program where things will get interesting, and if we're lucky, they won't be interesting at all. So we're going to have Andrea Riley, supervisor of the GRS team, provide an update on our latest GRS transmittal.
She should be on the line.
Andrea, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, and I'm happy to be here virtually to share with you all the upcoming GRS Transmittal 28 and some other information about future transmittals and some of the other things that the GRS team will be doing. But we are planning for GRS Transmittal 28 to be issued sometime in July, probably mid-July. So we welcome this opportunity to give you an overview of what to expect. So if you go to the next slide, please. So there are 9 new schedules in Transmittal 28. This is our biggest transmittal yet. As you can see from this slide, quite a few of the human resources related schedules and finally broken loose and are being issued. They also have a number of just general kind of administrative type records. And we do have one schedule that is being updated. We're adding administrative claims to GRS 1.1. And I'll go over some of the more significant changes with these schedules individually. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So GRS 2.1, which is employee acquisition records, probably one of the more significant changes you will see is the reduced number of authorities. If you're familiar with the GRS, there is GRS 1 item 33 has sub-items that pretty much go through the entire alphabet. There were a lot of sub-items, and we have managed to reduce those substantially, working with OPM and looking at new guidelines for hiring. We are also adding a disposition for interview records for applicants that are not selected. This was a huge gap in the GRS that caused problems for agencies. We've now fixed that gap by adding in this record or disposition authority. We've also added items related to political appointees, special hiring authorities, and pre-appointment records. So you will see some new content in that schedule. GRS 2.2 is for employee management records. This includes just general records like the OPS and performance management records. We have increased the retention of OPS to 129 years. Nobody pushed back on this. This is based on some ability to request benefits, essentially, reaches that long in time. We also have added dispositions for volunteer service records and documentation of employee skill sets. Next slide, please. GRS 2.3 is for employee relations records. New content here is for anti-harassment program records. We've also organized the schedule more around the programs to make it easier to kind of follow. There's usually about 2 items per program, one for program records and one for case files. Employee compensation and benefit records. We've provided some clarification on disposal of workers' compensation records and added items for child care subsidy and family medical leave act program records. Next slide, please. One of the probably biggest changes that you will see with this transmittal is that we are completely superseding GRS 4.3 with 2 new schedules, GRS 5.1 and 5.2. The reasoning for this is we've tried to build the GRS functionally, and 4.3 was always kind of problematic because it didn't really seem like a function. And so when we started working on 5.1 and 5.2, we realized how those items fit better into these schedules. And so the non-record keeping copies of electronic records item has gone into 5.1, basically unchanged. 5.1 also, we've worked to clarify common administrative records. That's what was GRF 23 item 1, so we've tried to be a little bit more specific with that item. 5.2 is for transitory and what we call intermediary records. That's the intermediary records part is the rest of 5.3, so all the input source records and output records are now going to be superseded and included in 5.2. We've actually pulled them all together into a single item to simplify them. We've also worked to clarify transitory records, although the basic definition hasn't really changed. We've just tried to make it more clear what a transitory record is. I do want to note that for input source records, if you're converting those hard copy records to electronic that were previously scheduled as permanent, you still need to do media neutral notifications. Those are still required. There's a note that will be in 5.2 about that, but there's nothing actually in the disposition instruction itself anymore. So please do note that that part of the process has not changed. That's in the CFR. It's still a requirement. We've just taken it out of the instruction. Also, we're adding an FAQ that's specifically related to explaining transitory electronic messages, so how you apply the transitory item to electronic messages and what constitutes a transitory electronic message. Next slide, please. Security records. This is a pretty big schedule. It contains facility, physical, and personnel security related records. The major new content here is for insider threat program records. We worked with a lot of stakeholders to develop this new section. Some other new content are interagency security committee member records. This doesn't actually include the committee itself, which is, I believe, sponsored by DHS. They have those records scheduled already, but just other agencies that have records related to that committee. SCIF accreditation and inspection records, one of my favorites, K-9 service records. Personnel security clearance records for individuals that are not issued a clearance have also been added in to kind of cover that gap area. Next slide, please. So these are the last of the changes, but we've got two schedules that are kind of related, but one is administrative and one is public-facing. But we have updated a schedule for help desk records to expand it beyond just IT help desk, because we recognize there's a lot of other administrative help desks out there for things such as payroll, shared services, and so the new GRS 5.8 covers those records, as well as IT help desk records. And then we've also added a new schedule for public customer service records, and this is for customer service that looks external to an agency. And so while there's a few records that used to be in the old GRS, to a large extent this is new content and covers records specific to providing customer service to the public. So next slide, please. Now we're just going to get into some of the reminders about what agencies are expected to do when a new GRS transmittal comes out. If you do not have previously approved authorities, you either need to use the GRS or submit a schedule requesting a deviation if you have the records. If you don't have the records, you don't need to do anything. But if you are going to be using the GRS, you have 6 months to distribute it to your staff. Next slide, please. Agencies may request to deviate from new GRS items, as long as they have all previously approved agency schedules. You do this via notification. You have 120 days after the issuance of the new transmittal to submit a notification, and we'll put the deadline in the ARM communication that sends that out to agencies. If you need to, please request an extension prior to the deadline. And I think, given the size of this transmittal, we really want to make sure agencies know they can request those extensions. You may very well need it because of the size of this particular transmittal. We have denied notifications that have come in late. We've also denied notifications that relate to older transmittals. So please keep that in mind as well, that if this only applies to the current transmittal, anything that was sent out earlier, you passed that deadline already. So please let us know. You can email the GRS team at our account. Many of you probably already know it, but it's grs_team@nara.gov. Extensions are always approved. I mean, we don't have an issue with that. We just need to know how long you're going to need. So we need to set a date for when we expect to get it, but you can always request them. And also, please use the spreadsheet that we provide on the GRS website. If you cannot find it, please email us, and we will make sure that you get it. It makes our review process much easier if you use that spreadsheet. Next slide, please. Just some reminders about when a notification is and isn't required. Anytime an agency plans to use its own authority instead of the GRS, a notification is required. So this does include your big bucket schedules. If they supersede GRS items, we need to know, we need that notification. It's usually a slam dunk that will approve it if it's a big bucket schedule, especially if it's one that we've previously reviewed anyway, so we know that there's not going to be any potential issues. But we do still need to get that notification from you so that your big bucket item is still valid. And even if the retention of your item is within accepted parameters of the GRS, so say, the GRS says, disposed when 3 years old, long retention is authorized for business use, and you want to keep them for 5 years, we still need a notification if you're going to cite your agency authority. That is still a deviation from the GRS. So we do need to know that. Next slide, please. So cases when you don't need to submit a notification are basically those where you are going to cite the GRS. So even if you set a specific retention that is longer than the minimum retention of the GRS. So that case where it's 3 years or longer in the GRS and you want to set it for 5, you can do that provided you still use the actual disposition authority for the GRS. That's kind of the purpose of that longer retention is authorized to allow agencies flexibility in setting longer retentions if they want to, and still use the GRS. Also, if you are, you have agency authorities that are deviations from old GRS items that have not yet been superseded, at this point, that's getting to be fewer and fewer. We do not need a notification for those items either. Sometimes we get them, but we don't need to review things that have not yet been superseded by the new GRS. Next slide, please. And that provides my transition to our future transmittal. The last transmittal of the update project that we've been working on for the past almost 5 years, that's part of the presidential directive, will be transmittal 29. We expect it in December of 2017, if not November. So we will meet our deadline. It includes 5 schedules. You can see them listed here. We have budgeting records, the last 8 human resources scheduled for health and safety records, agency accountability records, information technology records, which is wrapping up the last of the GRS 27 items for CIO records, and then finally rulemaking records, which is largely a new schedule, but covers a couple items that were hanging out in the old GRS. Also note that we are working on an update to GRS 6.4 right now. It will change the name to Communication and Information Sharing and includes items for web and social media records. Comments are due on this draft by June 30th. Again, you should receive that by AC memo, and it's up on the webpage. And you can please submit comments to us, review that schedule. We are very interested in receiving feedback. This may not get into the December transmittal, but might be shortly thereafter, depending on how quickly it moves along. It is an update to an existing schedule, but it's a pretty significant one. So please do take a look at that and provide us feedback by the deadline. Next slide, please. Just some updates on future plans for the GRS teams, because we are not going away as far as I know. Once we're done with this project, there's still work to be done with the GRS. We will be continuing to make some updates to the GRS. We've already had some of those identified as in keeping a list, so we're going to be going back over that list and prioritizing updates to existing schedules, possibly some new content. We are going to continue to work on scheduling guides. We've put out one, the public affairs scheduling guide, but we have some others that we've been working on, so we'll continue working on those. We're also planning some revisions to our website, the specific GRS part, so you may see some changes to kind of the look of that site, hopefully make it a little bit easier to find some information. We're also planning what we refer to as GRS version 3.0. So this is looking at what the GRS will look like in the future, and so we will be planning that over the next few years. We've been conducting a feedback study, talking to some agencies about the GRS, just to get some kind of feedback on, what's worked, what hasn't, what they'd like to see, what their issues are. We're looking at ways to further simplify the administrative GRS. We realize that there's still, I think, a lot of agencies that would prefer to see more bucketing of those items. We've kind of determined that we needed to do this phase of research that we have done in updating the GRS to really determine what the appropriate retentions are for some of these records before we could go that next step to try and to bucket them further. And so we're going to be looking at ways that we could do that. We're also continuing to look at ways to include permanent items in the GRS, because that's something that agencies have wanted. There's been some issues internally as to why we couldn't make that happen, and we're trying to find ways to solve those issues. Also, we'll be looking at ways to expand the GRS into more mission-related functions. And so we're looking, trying to cover more records, particularly common temporary records. But if we can get the common permanent records in there as well, we think that will be really useful to agencies to reduce scheduling and appraisal burdens. And so that's really our goal with the GRS, is to reduce the need for scheduling and appraisal of records that are common across the government. Last slide, please. So if you have any questions, please contact the GRS team. Again, is GRS_, which doesn't really show up here very well, team at NARA.gov. You can also check out our website, which is off the main records management page for the GRS. That has a lot of resources available, FAQs, the actual schedules themselves are available there, some updates on where we are with the project. We usually post our monthly status update, so it's a good source of information about where we are with things. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. This is Lawrence back here. Thanks for the update. It was a lot of great information and obviously a lot of hard work by you and the team. So thank you for that. So any questions here in the room? We'll start with the room first. We have a question in the back.
Hello, good morning. Andrea, this is Ivan King from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Had a question with regards to the possible inclusion of automated information systems that are common throughout the federal government. If there are any plans to revise the GRS to include those types of systems or disposition authority for those types of systems throughout the federal government?
I would say at this point, no, because this is the first time we've had kind of a request for that type of system, and I'm not entirely certain when you talk about an automated information system, what exactly you're referring to. Because in my mind, that could mean any number of things. Can you be a little bit more specific on what type, what the function of such a system would be, what it does?
So what are you saying? Hold on a second. The microphone's coming back to Ivan.
Systems, for example, like GovTrip, accounting systems that agencies use in support of their business activities that in some cases they don't actually have ownership of the system content itself, but they do in fact actually use it. They may capture information that's captured in that system, but they need to have control over the information they have, things of that nature.
Okay, all right, so yeah, all right, now I follow. So a lot of the information in those systems is already covered by the GRS. Things like GovTrip, basically the content would be covered by GRS 1.1 as the idea. So the bigger issue, I think, or the question the agencies have is who's responsible for disposition. It kind of depends on the system, but we have been working on and off on an FAQ for the GRS and government-wide systems like that, trying to understand how the GRS is applied to them. In many cases, the GRS should be applied to them. The question is who is responsible for doing it, and I think it depends on the system a lot and how the agreement between the agency, the agencies, really the agency that manages the system is in charge of the system, and the agency that is using the system. So there's a part of the problem that we've had with trying to get the FAQs out is trying to understand all of that and knowing that it's not just a simple answer. It really kind of depends on what your agreement is. But the bottom line is that most of the content is actually scheduled by the GRS.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Jim, any questions online? Okay. So we will go to our next agenda item and we'll bring up Don Rosen to talk about what's going on with oversight.
All right, good morning. All right, so this morning I just want to give a brief update on some oversight and reporting activities. I've briefed several times over the last 6 months, especially about what we're doing with reporting and some of our other activities. I just want to keep that conversation going. The work our team is doing, I just want to give a shout out to our team. We have two teams that do our oversight work. One is led by Evangela Winbush-Jeffrey, who's here in College Park and actually down here in the second row, for those who have not met Evangela. And of course, Cindy Smolovic, who leads our other team out of our office in Fort Worth. And Cindy actually briefed at the last BRIDG meeting on our oversight and reporting activities, as with the focus on reporting. And I'm just going to focus a little bit about what we're doing there since that last briefing and where we're going with some other oversight activities. Of course, the big one we've been doing, of course, is reporting, and this one has been a lot of time spent this year on reporting, mainly because of the big 2016 email deadline that was in the Managing Government Records Directive. So where we are right now, we've actually pretty much completed our analysis of all that data we received from the agencies. And again, what did we receive? We received over 100 SAO reports, which are all posted online, which is about 91% were received. The only ones we didn't were some real small agencies, but all the major agencies and components are in. 100% on the RMSA and the email management reports as well, which is excellent. So congratulations to all the agencies, and it was a lot of work. We really appreciate it, and all the information. All the email management reports are posted online and available. I encourage you to see those. And the RMSA reports, of course, we do not post the individual scores online, but we are working on the reporting. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what that's going to look like. The other thing we did finish is we also finished validation. So some of you might have been contacted by our staff, which was a real group effort between our two teams doing validation we do a sampling every year of agencies to make sure that the information we're receiving is kind of consistent with what we're also seeing on the reports. And it's actually good for us to see as we're doing that work as well. So we've completed all the validation, we completed all the analysis, and now we're actually working on the drafting, which is going to essentially be a consolidated report. Instead of doing 3 separate reports, we plan to issue one summary report. So what I'm going to show you now is just a couple of slides, a little sneak preview of what we've been finding. I asked Cindy to pull some interesting slides for me, what's going to be in the report. I'll start with the SAO report. So the first one here is, again, about email. What did we find? 79% of the agencies reported that, yes, they have met the deadline. And 21% they have not. Although I should say of the 21% have not, many are in progress, and they describe what they're doing to get there. So we expect this number to be actually considerably higher by the end of the year. But that's where the scores right now, which we think is good, trending in the right direction. And the maturity model actually gives us even more insight to what agencies are doing. So that is one interesting nugget we got from the SAO reports. The other interesting one from the SAO reports was on the 2019 goal. That number of what agencies say they're on target, I think it was close to like 98%, something really, really high. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Of course, when we were asking about email management last year, the number was 93%, and then we actually said, did you meet the goal? It came down a little bit to 80%. So some interesting trends there, but it looks like everyone is trending in a positive direction on those scores. So that's where we are with SAO reporting. So the other thing we asked, of course, was email management, and we sent out our maturity model tool. That's the first time we tried something like that. We think it was a very effective way for us to measure email, just to get beyond yes, no, did you do it, but where are you doing in the areas that matched up to our success criteria that we issued earlier in the year. So this slide, what represents is where you said these were the highest levels that most often we received on the different areas. So for example, email policies, most agencies rated themselves, a majority, at a level 3. 48% said they were there with their policies. Again, level, the highest you could be was a 4, so 0 to 4 rating. So 48% said they're at a 3. For systems, again, level 3 was the most prominent number we received, 42%. Email access, again, level 3 was the predominant number, 34%. So a little bit more of a mix there we saw, but overall, the majority was level 3. And the one area where I think we still have some work to do is on disposition. The most common level we saw from agencies was level 2. So hopefully, as that number will continue to increase, but 41% were in level 2 category, and hopefully more will start moving to level 3 and beyond. But the great thing about a maturity model is it allows you to see where you are in your different categories and give yourselves a summary score. So hopefully everyone is using this maturity model tool to help look at their email management programs and continue to use this potentially as a year-over-year tool to see how you're doing in different categories. The next one is on the records management self-assessment. So this particular slide we pulled was about electronic capture of email. There was a question in there. And the interesting thing is we took a look at the trends. We like to do that with the RMSA because we've been doing that since 2009. So we have about 7-8 years worth of data. But we started now, we want to look at kind of like 5-year chunks, especially since we've issued the directive. It's kind of interesting to see how numbers are trending. I pulled this particular one again. It was about email. We did ask you some questions on email. And this was the one about how you were transitioning. So we asked this question in 2013. Only 27% of the agencies said they were capturing, storing their emails in the email archiving system versus 75% were saying they were doing print and file. But here we are now, in 2016, 80% said they are now managing their email and email archiving system. 46% said so they're still doing print and file. But I should point out that this was a multiple choice question. So if you're wondering why that didn't come out to be a 20, it's because you could have answered multiple ways on it. But the good news is that we've moved from 27% to 80% for automation, which actually seems to be also consistent with the email management scores we received in the maturity model. So lots of interesting data, again, trending in the right direction. We also found that the overall RMSA scores are continuing to see agencies moving into the low-risk category, especially where we were 5-6 years ago. And those that were in high risk is coming down. I know Cindy shared some of those numbers at the last meeting, and you'll see some of that in the full-blown report, but I didn't want to go ahead and share the same information again. But again, we're excited about what we're seeing with the data. We're continuing to put it all together in one actually consolidated report. So we're working on, so instead of giving you 3 separate reports, we plan to give you one consolidated summary analysis report. So that we're working on finalizing that. Then, of course, it has to go through quite a bit of review, not only with internally with our leadership, but groups like OMB as well are always interested in seeing that. So what do we do with it? Once it's done, of course, we will send it to all of the appropriate oversight groups we work with in Congress. We also post it on our website. And we always get lots of attention from outside groups. The news media that covers our work, those publications always write articles about it. We expect to do that again. We'll blog about it. It will be out there. So we expect to be a lot of interest, especially around email management. And then as we pivot towards the interest in 2019 and beyond. So our plan is to have that out sometime, hopefully in the summer. In just a matter of us getting it finalized and going through our approval process. And then you'll see that done. And that'll hopefully conclude reporting for 2016. It was a really interesting effort this year and a lot of hard work by our staff and then, of course, you by the agencies, and we really, really appreciate the information we got. It's very valuable to us and hopefully very valuable to all of you as well. That said, we're actually already starting to plan what 2017 will look like and how we're going to do that, whether we're going to use similar tools like the maturity model again, when we're going to do it. Those are questions we get, and we're going to start thinking about those as soon as we close the books on 2016. So that's where we stand on reporting. Of course, reporting isn't all we do in oversight. I know that's what I talk about a lot when I come to these meetings, but we are also very, very busy this year in doing agency inspections. This year, we've been focusing on a series we've been doing with Department of Defense. Those of you who work with DoD are probably aware of that, and we've been doing some work on that. Right now, we're visiting with DLA. So we have a multi-year effort with that. And of course, we've also been doing what we call our department coordination series, where we're trying to hit lots of the departments and looking at their programs. So we've already recently posted to our website the completed inspection reports we did at VA, Interior, and DHS. And we also have several others getting ready to be completed, Commerce, USDA, DOT, DOL, and those will all go up on the website. I should point out that as we've been doing these inspections, we've actually been looking at ways to kind of streamline our reports. So you'll notice with our next report, it's going to be a little bit shorter in length. Still great information, very valuable findings and recommendations, but a little bit more streamlined. We're constantly looking at ways that we can get the inspections done and completed as quickly as possible, and so we can move on to the next. We're always looking to streamline our processes. So, but our next set of reports actually look a little bit different than the ones that are currently posted on the website. But we are very excited about that. So we will continue with our inspections. The teams are doing great work on getting out there, and if you've not been part of one, that is something we're actually thinking about is for a future bridge session where we might bring in some of the agencies that have been parts of inspections and talk about some of the lessons learned from those. You know, the inspections are not only invaluable in the reports and the findings for the agencies themselves, but the information in them can be valuable to those that were not part of it, and we encourage you to take a look at them. They're on our website under our oversight page. Take a look at those inspection reports, see the findings and the recommendations that we provide. We try to write them so that they can be somewhat general, that you can look at them and see, hey, could this apply to my program as well? And we encourage you to do that. So in addition to doing our doing our inspections, we have another product, another tool that we are exploring to use in our program. Right now we're calling them assessments. It's where we're going to, instead of doing a full-blown assessment, we're looking to do something a little bit quicker, a little more targeted, focusing on a very specific records management topic, taking a slice, and then evaluating multiple agencies at one time with single agency site visits, getting in there like one day contact, and then turning these around. They're not going to be individual inspection reports, rather a summary report of what we find. So we're excited about exploring this. We're working on kind of finalizing what that process will look like, what our topics we want to hit can look like. There is no shortage of topics that we could potentially cover by doing this, by looking at a slice of records management topic. But we think this is something that will be of interest to the community and will be a way for us to kind of get out there and get back information to you on trending topics. So we're excited about finishing that process. Once we get that done, we'll send out some requests for participation to some selected agencies, and then hopefully we'll begin our pilots of these assessments in the summer. So we're excited about this new tool in our kind of toolbox as we expand our oversight program. And we look forward to sharing more of this as we finalize the process and we start doing them. And once we start doing them and have a couple done, we'll come back and share what we find in our initial assessments. So again, what's next for us as we work through the summer, just to summarize, we're going to finalize our reporting for 2016 and we'll continue our inspections and our assessments. I should also mention that our program also does the unauthorized disposition process for those of you who are in that situation, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions about that process. One of the things I had talked about at past meetings was that we were going to start doing system audits. We have not hired the staff for that yet to do that work. Some of that kind of put on hold with the recent hiring freezes, but we are still looking at ways that we can potentially do the system audit, so we are not forgetting about that function. We just haven't that was something we looked to start this year, but we're still thinking about ways we can make that happen. We know we are committed to doing them at some point. It just did not happen yet, but it is something we are trying to figure out different ways we can do that, because we do think it's very important for us to do that work. So a busy summer ahead for us and into FY18, but we're excited about the products we have in our program and where we're going, and we look forward to getting these new products out to everyone in our oversight program. And with that, take some questions about what we're doing. No questions on oversight or any of ours? Anyone on the phone? All right, well, with that, we will look forward to getting the full reports out to you and reporting back when that's all completed. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. So all the presenters are doing a great job today. Everything is so clear. We're answering all the questions before they even come up. So outstanding job. Our last presentation today is Gary Ralphus, Patent Cleanup. He's going to give us an update on training program.
Well, good morning, everybody. Glad to see you again. A few topics today. I'll be pretty brief, and then towards the back of this, I want to spend a little time on a pilot that we've run recently and let you all know of a possibility of something that exists that we're going to see if we can support over the long term. So one of the questions that came up, I think the last time I was here, was where are we in making progress about the new curriculum and rolling that out? So we'll kind of go through where we are on that. What you see on the slide is really the large-scale process that we run through, starting with what are the tasks that have to be done at each of the new levels, and actually what are the steps to do them. So that task analysis is our starting point. From there, then we move it into the design of what that course and that instruction is going to look like. Then take that into full-blown development of whatever the media that's necessary, participant guides, all the things that will go into training. In our initial work, we've kind of looked at doing that with doing face-to-face training first. And then in that second circle there, we think about what does it mean to do this training online. So sometimes that pushes us back into design, going, we might have to redesign some of that face-to-face to make it viable online. And then the last thing we'll do with all of these is conduct a pilot. So that's kind of the process that every level will go through. So at the moment, here's where we sit. Level 1, we've done all the task analysis, and we appreciate the support that many of you gave us doing that work. We've done the design for that, so we've got a full-blown facilitator guide laying out all the lessons, all the content, and that will be moving into development this summer. So we anticipate both potentially the online and face-to-face versions of those getting done this fiscal year, and we'll probably be coming back to you early next year to look for folks to participate in this pilot. For us, it's really important that we get that actual audience that we're trying to target as part of the pilot to check its effectiveness, right? So if we're, particularly at this level, we're thinking about custodians, with all due respect, having a bunch of agency records officers that have been doing the job for 25 years take the course doesn't tell us a lot about how effective it is. So we'll be coming back to you probably late summer, early fall, looking for folks that might have some custodians that want to volunteer for the training, get us feedback on how effective the training will be. So level 2, we anticipate starting a task analysis here probably in the next couple of weeks. In fact, this afternoon when we leave here, we'll have a kickoff meeting for the team that's working on that. Again, we'll be coming back out to you where we are looking for subject matter experts that we can sit down with and say, exactly how do you perform this particular task? Whether it's preparing something for a disposition, doing an inventory, whatever the tasks are at that particular level on our list. And then that should move into design in the first quarter. So we'll start to see an overlap in how we're doing our work here. In level 1, a lot of this was us building the processes that we're going to carry through forward now that we've got that done. We've got the folks set up in different teams to manage the overlap and progress these through. Task analysis for the next level will also begin here in the fall. I think looking at the calendar, we may even try to start that as soon as August rather than first quarter, but tentatively that's what we're planning. And again, the end goal for all of these is to try to roll this out as close to the beginning of fiscal year 19 as we can. This level 3 on our big plan right now, the pilot is really targeted around the first quarter of fiscal year 19. I think we'll be okay with that. Again, like all of you, we're subject to our resource constraints at the moment. So, through the hiring freeze, we've lost a couple critical team members that have, one retired, one went to take a promotion in another agency. So we're going to have to work through the effect of that on all of this process, but we're pretty confident we can stay close to our timelines. And again, we'll come back to you and keep you informed. Throughout all of this, it's a partnership for us. One of the things we know is that we need your feedback, your input the whole way through to make sure that the training is as effective as it can be for how you do things. So that partnership between NARA and your agencies is going to be delivering the best training product we can for you. And it's worked already for us. So I talked about the sustainable formats course, I think the last time I was here. That's exactly kind of the model we ran with that, and particularly the getting your feedback in the pilot was very helpful. So we kicked off the first formal iteration of this course in June, last week. Doing really well. Interesting to see the amount of variance we have in the agencies that are attending and how that's already playing out. So last week, after 3 days of online discussions, I kind of took some snapshots of what are people talking about in this course, right? We've asked them in that first week, just get settled in, look at some lessons, but largely what are the kinds of challenges that you're facing that hopefully the information in this course will help you deal with. And here's the kind of things that we find in that data. What's exciting, I think, for us is to watch in this online asynchronous environment, as soon as 2 days into the course, we started seeing discussions crop up among the participants solving each other's problems. So certainly we know that the body of expertise is not only in NARA with records management, but practically speaking, the challenges that agencies face, someone else often has solved in another agency. So these threaded discussions and doing this asynchronously also provide another way for people to interact over time through this course and kind of wander outside a little bit the direct content that's into the course into things that are related, but maybe we didn't build a lesson for that. Well, the peers in the course often have experience that can be shared around that. So it's exciting for us to see this happen. Again, we've got this scheduled for July and September. When I looked yesterday morning, July is about full already, so that's great news. But I encourage you, if you have folks in your agency that are interested, they want to attend in July, get on the wait list anyhow. Occasionally we have folks that, for either personal reasons or the agency changing their schedules, drop out of the training. So if someone's on our wait list, then we plug them in, usually roughly a week before the start date, and then another iteration in September. For the next fiscal year, I'm pretty sure we have this scheduled at least once a quarter, and I believe it might be every other month. So we'll try to make this available again, try to match what we do with how much we offer it with the demand we see coming for you. Along with this in 18, I wanted to remind everybody as you start thinking about budgets and planning that we're making a pretty big shift for us in some of the way we think about offering training in 18. So rather than the past where we've kind of looked at around the country historically, where do we think there might be some demand? We find a federal facility, set up training there. We've kind of scaled that back and are going to move to more of an on-demand system. So the locations you see on the screen are what is scheduled for the field. Here in Washington, D.C., between either A1 or A2, there's a set of courses every month scheduled, if not more than one set. I think we try to squeeze some extra iterations in here next year. But beyond this, we're going to rely on you to tell us, hey, I've got a group of folks that need training. Can we get training scheduled at this particular location? Or, hey, I've got a few folks and we would love to host something. Can we set it up and see if there are other people in our geographic region or that would come to this place? And we'll do more of that next year to try to smooth out some of the ups and downs we see on our end of doing our best to look at the data from history and then finding out that in that particular year, it didn't work out and we're canceling a bunch of training schedules for locations that just didn't have the body of folks that needed training in that purpose. So that's kind of a run through of things that have been fairly recent, ongoing, just a little update. This next little piece, though, is really exciting. So I'm going to try to stick a little bit close to my notes, so I'm going to apologize if I'm reading, but I want to be pretty accurate with this. So over the last few months, we've tried this pilot. One of the things that we absolutely know is that a lot of what you learn in the classroom never makes it back to the workplace. There's a lot of reasons why that happens, but we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, are there other things we can do to help bridge that gap so that more of what we have in training actually gets implemented when people go back to their workplace. So we've been able to partner with the agency assistance team that's inside the Office of the Chief Records Officer, who does a lot of this work anyhow. So the idea of connecting them to what goes on as training has really been, I think, a pretty powerful opportunity. So how does this partnership work? So you may have all felt like this at some point after training. You've got all this new knowledge, but you're not really sure where to start. And frankly, I think what happens a lot is people go through the training and they start to get overwhelmed when they recognize all the work that might be ahead of them with records management. And you start to kind of assess where are you at versus all the things that you're learning and you should be doing. And it can be just overwhelming about how do you start, where do you get things back on track in your office. So we've run 2 pilots over the last couple of months where a member of the agency assistance team attended a portion of the training, usually on the back end of it, sometimes all of it. And then they did a visit with that organization at the end of the training. So the next day essentially is what we set up. Now, when they were there at the visit, really all they were doing was looking around. right? So saying, hey, let me talk with some of the folks, let's meet with the managers and work with the trainees to talk about how are things really, where do you stand? Maybe here's some suggestions about where you want to start with some of this. And I want to be clear, we're not trying to do an inspection, an audit, an evaluation assessment, though this literally is potentially let's just walk around together and talk to people and see what's going on with your records so that we can help you try to make sense of everything you learned and maybe pick a starting point. So occasionally, we might all feel like we need a little therapy, right? It can be overwhelming. But rather than do that, what our agency assistance folks really have focused on is how can we now move into a coaching role in this day that we're together and help develop that plan of what you heard in training, how do you put it to use now? So instead of feeling overwhelmed, you start to begin to get a sense of, okay, where do I begin? What can I do? What are the resources I got out of training that I might have forgotten about that actually are going to help me with these problems, right? So while we've only run a couple of pilots, we're seeing that the agencies have really, really valued this. One of our lessons learned from this is that maybe delaying that assistance visit for a week or a couple of weeks might help. We're still seeing in these a little bit of that, okay, I've just got through training, I'm still a little bit trying to digest it and still some overwhelmed. So we're going to look at potentially trying to delay that and see if that works better. But I think the best way to kind of solidify how this has gone is to read you a note from the agency that did the first one of these. And kind of exciting what we found. So bear with me as I read verbatim here. So good morning. I wanted to drop you a line to say thanks for assisting us in getting Jeff and LJ out for the NARA Bro training and the NARA Assistance Program pilot. As always, Jeff provided an excellent period of instruction which was catered to what we needed here at Corona. Thanks for that flexibility. For the Assistance Program pilot, I was skeptical after agreeing to have LJ accompany Jeff and staying an additional day. I wasn't sure what to do with her since the organization's personnel are usually overly busy with extremely structured schedules. I was on the verge of calling it off, but decided to give it a shot, and I'm glad that I did. Once LJ arrived, I made a few calls and we were out and about. LJ was really helpful, and the personnel she interacted with were very grateful to have a NARA representative in their offices, fielding RM questions, listening to the current program challenges, and providing excellent recommendations. Very productive visits and discussions with our infrastructure division, public affairs division, security division, comptroller department, acquisition and readiness department, and legal department. Pleasantly surprised with what LJ was able to accomplish, and I truly enjoyed her being here for the day. Positive endorsements for this program. So again, what we see is I think there's a lot of value there for that. We don't have a great deal of capacity to do these yet, but we want to partner with you to get that feeling of success and help the folks after training feel like they are in a better position to take on the challenges and do this. So as we move forward, if you're looking for agency-specific training and you call Michelle up, one of the things she may ask, depending on our workload and our resources, is this something that you're potentially interested in? And we'll do our best to try to work with you and make that fit your needs, connect it with the training. And then the other thing is, frankly, this isn't necessarily a new idea per se. It's the whole reason agency assistance has existed inside the Office of the Chief Records Officer. So even if you're not interested in training or don't have that need, you can always call up Darren or send him an email and say, you know what, we've got a need for someone to come help us look at something. He'll sit down with you, work out what that project looks like, kind of do an assessment to determine, is it appropriate for his team to take this on, or is this of the scale or scope that we need to shift it over to the records management consulting services inside the Federal Records Center program? So Darren and David work together a lot on these efforts. And again, our goal at the end of this is try to connect the effectiveness of training back to improving records management. And this is just another way that we think we can work with you to extend how all that fits together and improve the records management across the federal government. So with that, any questions on training?
I've got one. Wayne Best asked, is the records custodians training a train the trainer program, or do you plan to train the trainer program sometime in the future?
Great question. So this has come up fairly recently in some of our thinking about, our future of the training program. We have, I think, in our thinking, the goal to get through this curriculum redesign first. Roll those out. And in particular, we're also looking at, with those, making sure they're available online. In fact, if we run into resource problems, Rich started talking with our team about maybe we should do online first, because it's simpler for people to access potentially. So that'll go through the beginning of fiscal year 19. I think at that point, when we've gotten through some of the reform planning, we've gotten some data back on that, one of the things I have on my agenda is to start talking about what is the next thing for that. Can we look at doing train-the-trainer? What does it mean to potentially try to turn agencies loose doing their own training using NARA materials in the future? Is that even feasible? What would it look like? How do we make that happen if we can do it? So, great question, something that's on our minds, on our agenda to look at more carefully in about another year to year and a half. Other questions?
Could you please go back to the previous slide, because I don't think Darren's email address is correct. It's darren.cote@nara.gov.
Oh, thank you. I apologize for that. Yep, we got an extra Cote at in there. All right. Well, if there are no others, thank you, and wish you all a great summer and great day, and hopefully we'll see you and your folks in training soon.
Thanks, Gary, and thank you to all the presenters. It was, I think, a really good day. I hope you all agree with me. It was a lot of good information and some discussion. Hopefully we can continue the discussion via email after the meeting. So just to let you all know, so you can put it on your calendar, the next BRIDG meeting is August 15th. I'm guessing it's probably going to be as warm outside on that day as it is today. So the air conditioning will be running, and we'll see you back here in August. Have a great day.